Hey everyone, CJF Hotshot here, and welcome back to my Flash Major Story Arc tier list. Last time we did the Wade era, now we're jumping right into the Johns era, and if you can actually have a look at the screen, you'll probably be able to tell that I'm probably going to be much more critical here. Because even though I read the Wade run and the Johns run at the same time for the first time back in 2019, I had a vastly different experience with both of these runs. But we'll start positive. But no, we can't start positive because the first arc's actually Wonderland, which I put in lacking. And this is like the probably definition of a filler arc. Flash Wonderland is set in an alternate mirror timeline where the Flash loses his speed. And no one knows who the Flash is. No one knows that Wally West is the Flash. And Barry Allen is alive and a cop. Oh wait, Did Geoff Johns rework Flash Wonderland into another book that I hate that is not on this list? Yeah, he did, I've decided, because they're both terrible. Well, Wonderland isn't terrible, but, like, it's not good, is it? Yeah, Wally has lost his powers for half of this book, and during the back half of the book, it is much better. However, at that point, I've lost all interest. Like, I don't care about the lore of this world. So just like, at that point, it's just like, leave the reader alone. So normally I just skip Wonderland whenever I'm reading Geoff Johns' Flash run. And normally I skip straight to probably one of the better story arcs in Geoff Johns' tenure, The Flash, Blood Will Run. I put this in Spectacular because it's a really great story. It starts off with Wally in Keystone City, and there's a new mass murderer who has the links of all of the victims of Cicada's crimes. The murderer is, of course, called Cicada. But all of the victims of his crimes have been saved by the Flash in the past. And the reason he's doing this is because it's a cult, because Cicada is a leader of a cult of Flash worshippers, which very meta, and I like it, and it brings about a lot of memes of raise your hand if you will die for the Flash. Like, and it's pretty cute. And of course, this is when Scott Collins starts drawing the book, like during his like immense like peak of his career, I believe. So yeah, Blood Will Run is a solid story. Next, we're gonna talk about all of these like rogue one-shots where Wally into like the Tar Pit one and the Girder one and Caged with Grodd. These are often one-shots where Geoff Johns brings brings a new rogue or an old rogue back into the Flash, and Wally has to confront them. And it's just like an issue like brawl out. And these like scattered all throughout the run, but mainly at the beginning when Geoff is working with Scott. And I really like these because I put them in good. Because I think they're solid stories for what they are. Introducing new characters, giving some layers for like the background of the story, and like moving the story right along whilst not being a major arc. And I count these because they're part of the bigger story. So yeah, I put all of these in good. However, actually I'll save the profiles for a bit, because the next arc is Flash Birthright, which is the reintroduction to Weather Wizard, and it's dealing with the potential of Wally and Linda, of Wally having a potential child with one of his exes in the past, which turns out to be Weather Wizard's child, actually. And we see Weather Wizard, like, actually being treated as a full-on villain for once, which is kind of surprising considering he's a Silver Age bad guy. But, like, this is probably where Geoff Johns is the strongest as a writer. Bringing in new foes for Wally to face and having a quick throwdown between 1 and 3 issues. This is what Geoff is good at. At least in my opinion, this is. Next, we have the Rogue Profiles. These are also scattered throughout Geoff Johns' runs on the Flash. Yes, runs plural, because he also does it in his second run. And even Joshua Williamson does one in his run. I'm putting these all together because I put them in lacking. Yeah, I don't like the Rogue Profiles, because unlike the Rogue setup stories, which move the story right along in a nice and natural pace, these Rogue Profiles interrupt the story, like full on, and I hate it. Like, I don't want the story to be interrupted. Like, I'm getting into my groove reading all of these issues of The Flash, and it's just like, oh, it's Captain Cold. What's he been doing the past few years? Like, I don't give a shit. Either have him face Wally, or just don't do anything at all. Because Wally only, like, shows up for, like, one panel in each of these stories, and it's ultimately for naught. And this is, like, a theme that I really don't like in comics, where the main character is just, like, outside of the story for no reason. Like, Wade, of course, had a few issues like this, but it was always more justified. Like in Flash issue 100 of Terminal Velocity, where Wally is presumed dead, so he can't be in the story, you know? Like, when your main character is out of the story because, you want to divert to fucking Captain Cold. No, I don't care. I don't like it. And this becomes... and this, of course, starts, like, Jeff Johns' and, by an extension, future Flash writers' obsession with the rogues. And also, like, DC in general. Like, don't get me started, like, the villains. I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I? Let's just go into the next big storyline, which is Jeff Johns' best story, and that's Crosswire. It's like the culmination of all the rogue introductory stories before it, where Wally, like, faces a rogue, and it puts Wally against the Thinker, a man who, whilst can't move really fast, his mind is faster than a tick of a second. And it's just fascinating to watch Wally, like, going through the motions, running quick on his feet, but not quite having a plan, but then getting a plan at the end. And, of course, like, this was just after 9/11. And so we get Keystone City, which was, like, set up in all of these previous stories, actually fighting to defend their city. And it's awesome. It's spectacular. And that's why I put it in spectacular. And this is Jeff's best arc. Because this is, like, showing all of his strong points as a writer. And, like, bringing it all together. So, yeah. Next, we have Flash Run Riot. This is just after Linda found out that she was pregnant. And there's, like, a breakout at Iron Heights. Because that's where the rogues from Crossfire had been put in. And because because people warned Wolf that Gorilla Grodd couldn't be caged, but Wolf caged him anyway, Grodd broke out. And now Wally is on the hunt for Grodd, after Grodd pretty much paralyzes his friend Hunter Zolomon. So Wally's on this chase all the way throughout Gorilla City, and it ends with Wally's defeat. Gorilla Grodd survives another day, and he's locked out from Gorilla City. Because whilst Gorillas saw the Flash as a friend in the past, he's responding with hostility because he's after a killer. And the Gorillas don't respond nicely to this, because it's just like, you come in peace or you don't come at all. So yeah. And Run Riot's a great story because it also leads into Blitz. Blitz is Hunter Zolomon's, like, big, I am the greatest enemy of all for the Flash. Even though I think, like, Kadabra's Wally's biggest foe, but, like, don't tell anyone I said that. Like, this is where Zolomon's just like, all right, I'm Wally's biggest foe now, and I'm going to put everything on the table. He depregnates Linda. He, like, barrages Bart, Jay, Jesse, and Wally, and it takes the combined speed of all four speedsters to take Zolomon down. And even then, Wally is losing these other people's speed, so he's just relying on his own speed force at the end. And it ends in tragedy for everyone. And this would be the best story that Jeff has ever wrote. However, it gets salted by the fact that, by the way, we're having Barry come back for a second, and we're having Hal come back for a second. And this is just Jeff being self-indulgent and, like, putting a soft reset in everything. And it leads into probably one of the worst Flash story ever, if we're going by what I count as a Flash story. The first arc of this retrospective that I've put in terrible, Flash Ignition. Right, the art is terrible, we all know this, but it's also like, instead of having Wally and Linda deal with the serious issue of miscarriage and the death of their potential children, Wally and Linda are thrusted into forgetting who they are, Wally's forgot that he's the Flash and now has to go through his origins all over again. He discovers that he has super speed. He's working at the Keystone City Police Department and his secret identity has been reset. You know who figures all this out? Fucking Batman. Now, though, whenever Jeff Johns writes a book, you'll notice that as soon as he gets Batman involved, it deteriorates. Except for this, like, one time in his Green Lantern run. But, like, Flash Ignition is just, like, some of the worst and boggling storytelling I've ever seen. Like, instead of dealing with the very real issue of Linda's miscarriage and possibly educating the readers about this terrible situation that can and does happen to people, he goes on pretty much resetting Wally and going through Flash year 1. But it's year 7, so who gives a shit, right? And it is year 7 because he's 27 at this point. So, yeah, I don't like it. I don't like Ignition at all. And it doesn't get too much better because every Jeff Johns written Flash story after this, The Secret of Barry Allen, and, like, other than, like, the one-shots, the one-shots are okay because they're really good, like, obviously, but, like, The Secret of Barry Allen and Rogue War, because they lead into each other, so I think it's safe to say we can kind of fuse them together, but I'm using separate images. They end off with a salty taste in my mouth because Wally isn't himself anymore at this point. It's the huge identity crisis tie-in where it makes off Barry looking like kind of a terrible character. And of course, this isn't necessarily Jeff's fault, but everything he does to Wally is. And then there's Rogue War, which is Jeff's self-indulgent, instead of Wally on the run to deal with the Thinker and the Rogues, it's instead the Rogues beating each other up, and then Wally pretty much having to solve it. But Wally's more in the background of the story, which is a bit frustrating to me. And then instead of committing to that premise, Jeff pulls a fast one and decides, no, we're getting Zoom and Thorn involved. Like, yeah. It ends off good because the twins are born, right? And we get this end page where it's just like, my name is Wally West, I'm the Flash, the fastest man alive. And it gets all these, like, images from the people in Jeff's run, and it kind of makes you feel nostalgic for it. But Rogue War just isn't a good story to me, so it doesn't feel worth it. But that's my opinion, innit? And then we get the next story arc, which is one that hasn't been collected in trade. It has many titles, but for today, we're calling it The Flash, The Last Man Standing. This is written by the Flash editor Joey Cavalieri. This whole story is the definition of editorial mandate. Joey Cavalieri doesn't get the Flash as a character because for the past, 5 years, he's been working with Jeff Johns. And whilst at the start of Jeff Johns' run, he wrote Wally really well, in the back half, he wrote Wally quite stilted. And so this 4-issue arc by Joey Cavalieri ends up quite stilted. And I don't like it that much. It's fine for what it is. It's not overtly offensive. But there's just these little things. The idea that Wally's taking his kids to church, when that's not really been a theme explored in the book before, but kind of, because Wally believes in science and the Speed Force, but the idea of the Flash going to church, it's a sour taste in my mouth, I guess. And of course the art is just what you'd expect from an editorial mandate. It's just get it out quick. But that is my genuine feeling. Which is why it may come to a shock to you that I like the next 2 arcs much better. The Flash, the fastest man alive, lightning in a bottle, is surprisingly quite good. I did a video on this a year ago. I deleted it because I was embarrassed by it. And whilst it is a slow burn of an arc, it gets all of its themes right home. And if lightning in a bottle, if the writers were allowed to continue on The Flash, the fastest man alive, it would have been an amazing Flash run, I feel. Because, like, of course, people didn't, like, fully understand Wally as the Flash until Born to Run. So if people, like, if the book just had more time, it would have been amazing. But, of course, DC didn't really give them that time because DC's executive editor was Dan DiDio, so, you know. But yeah, I do like Lightning in a Bottle, and it's a solid arc with solid art by Ken Lashley and Carl Kershaw, and a nice, like, dynamic story, which does put Bart and his identity at the forefront, whilst Jay is acting as the Flash, even though he's slowed down, so he can't fully commit. Like, it's a nice slow burn, which, whilst is kind of muted out by Flash Full Throttle also kind of serves a purpose of course, like, killing Bart, right? But it also serves a purpose of showing what sacrifice means. Like, the Flash and the symbolism of sacrifice. And that is very important in a Flash story. And the art is quite lackluster. And although, like, the last arc is, like, written by Mark Guggenheim, it's much better than the back half of Jeff Johns' Flash run, because at least it feels like there's stakes, and the hero actually losing in a story is kind of refreshing. And of course, I'm counting All Flash as part of Full Throttle, and I love All Flash 2007. It's just Wally sucking all of the speed force out of Inertia and just making him stand as a statue. Like, this is Wally in, like, full rage mode after Inertia basically killed his cousin. So yeah, that's where we're running off for now. I do hope you've enjoyed it. And next time, we'll go into the Wild West era into the New 52. Alright, see you everyone.